Welcome to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast, where insights, attitudes, and methods for success get illuminated. Learn what leaders and change workers have done and are doing now to create magnificent futures. We interview great guests who inspire you to overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Be sure you visit our website at self-helpcoaching.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, just relax as you listen. You can do something else, but be ready to make an important note. And let's get started.
The title of this interview is Support in the Absence of Natural Support. And my guest is Oanh Kim Lam. And we'll talk about her name. It's a very interesting name, Vietnamese, of course. And she is a very interesting, wonderful life coach, but not a regular life coach. She is a venting coach, which I've never heard of before. I've heard of Primal Scream from the 70s, which was always interesting. All therapeutic approaches interest me. So she's going to, and this interests me, and she's going to tell me about venting coaching and more. Her background and training is in mental health. Recently, she went back to obtain a postmaster certificate in life coaching, which is very interesting. I was that at a university, Kim, or was that at a college? That's
yes.
great. Go on.
Yes, from a university.
Now, I got my life coaching certificate, which is not even necessary to be a life coach. It's a very unregulated field. At the Center for Integrative Hypnosis in Manhattan, Melissa Tears Institute and Practice, which was very, I learned a lot there. But of course, I've heard of colleges offering this field, and I'm glad, I love the coaching field. So that's great. But you got your own niche, which is venting. That's great. Why venting?
Well, after working in the mental health field for 2 decades, as a therapist, as a counselor, as like community resource person, I've actually just looked at what it is that we do, that this one particular area that we do that is so effective. All the other intervention is definitely effective. This one particular thing that we do in the mental health service field is listening to people vent. Right. That is basic first step to anything that people do when they actually go out and seek help. So every life coach tend to eventually develop a niche, and that is mine.
I read your information. You said this is what it begins with. This is the first step, which is venting, which is to express areas of a person's life that they're not satisfied with. And that's the first step. And of course, I agree with you. But we're going to talk about this because this is something I have some, strong ideas about. And with that first step, you say, you and your client together, can have a field day with things that they want to work on, discuss, improve. But the thing is to start with small steps that they want to work on, and no major projects, just everyday things that would help improve the person's overall level of function, content, and well-being. I love that. And the word function is a key word for me. I love functionality. I used to be a dysfunctional person. I think that dysfunction is so common today that people they don't even like to use the word, and they're like, that they say that normal is dysfunctional, and I take issue with that. I'm like, no, normal is function. Dysfunction is abnormal. We want to get to normal, to function. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't like that. Well, yeah, you may not like it. Does that make it untrue? Do you want to be dysfunctional? Or you want to be functional? So what are your thoughts on that?
I don't actually see something as dysfunctional unless the person thinks it's dysfunctional. So it's very individualized. My interpretation or I don't want to put a label into what people are experiencing. I won't call it dysfunctional unless they think it's dysfunctional or it's disrupting their lives. Because you can do something repeatedly and it's not working out well for you, but you're okay with it. It's not dysfunctional to the person. So for me to kind of give them a label and kind of encourage them to change is pointless. They're not going to change. It's working for them. Why change when it's working?
But
You know?
is it working though? Have they resigned to the outcome which is undesired, or is it really okay? That's a point that I make.
Yeah, well, it's okay so long as the person's okay with it. Because first step is this: it's like in the field of mental health, we always want to get goals. We always want to generate goals. We want people to work on something. We got to find something to work on something. Why can't we just allow the person to exist, to be able to communicate what they're struggling with? You know, a lot of it has to do with insurance willing to pay for certain things and not other, right? So we got to find something to work with. No, we don't. What if it's working for the person? We encourage it, support it, and perhaps maybe even if I think it's not working, it's not something I want to do, that's not irrelevant, because telling somebody what to do is not what we do. It's supporting what the person wants to do.
Well, of course. Of course, right? If I went around suggesting people adopt my rules and my ideas of how the world would be, I would be one exhausted person and very unsatisfied, because that's not the way the world works, and that's not the way people work, right? We are our own agents. We have our own maps of the world, our own desires, our own goals, our own backgrounds. It's really not for anyone else, more or less, to tell you what to do. But that has a whole, bunch of baggage behind it. But let me stop there. Before that, I introduced you quite organically, and I really like the way that happened. But let me just tell the listeners about you, about Kim. And now, first of all, as I said at the beginning, her name is Oanh Kim Lam, which is Vietnamese. And we discussed this before the interview. I explained that in America, Americans, we have a first, middle, and last name, and a lot of people might think that Oanh is her first name, but it's not. Kim is her first name. So that is very interesting. Now Kim is a very common Korean name as well, but you are Vietnamese. What does Oanh mean in the Vietnamese name format? Is that
well? Let me phrase this. I think I might have said it wrong. Over the years, most people have such a difficulty time pronouncing my name Oanh. So I decided to use my last name so people can call me Kim, because there's no need to just really, it's not that important. We're interacting. You, Tony, and Kim is interacting. I am so full of myself that I've always constantly had to correct people to spell my name correctly. I am so easygoing. It doesn't take anything away from me. Why continue to correct people, making sure they got my name correctly, pronounce it correctly, print it correctly? Ultimately, I am not that attention to detail. I actually appreciate the fact that they try, but it's okay. World won't end if you butcher my name for a minute, right? So rather than torturing people, I says, you know what? Call me Kim. And then I get stuck to it. I forgot that that's my middle name because I'm so used to it. Isn't that crazy?
I think it is a bit crazy. So it is the same format as here in America, first, middle, and last name. So your middle name is actually Kim, but your first name is Oanh, which I mispronounced. I thought I had it right. No, it's Oanh. I would like to call you. Listen, you only got to tell me once. I pay attention to detail. So if you would prefer, at any level, for me to call you Oanh, I shall do that. But if Kim is what you want to go with, that's fine with me too. So which is it?
Kim is fine.
Kim, it is very good. So great. So I love language, and I love geography and cultures and nationalities. I'm very intrigued by all of them, and that's why I went down that line. And I'm also very respectful of others, and so I like to get to the bottom of it, or at least to a degree where I have a greater understanding of it. Okay, so what about Kim? Well, she's the owner of Ventia Vent Life Coaching, LLC. She's a graduate of Temple University in psychology, Rutgers University in rehabilitation counseling, and a post-major graduate from Rider University with a certificate in life coaching. Her educational work history has a background of 20 plus years in direct care and human services. She created Ventia Vent Life Coaching because after years of working in her field, she wanted to create a confidential place for individuals to vent to work on everyday life issues relating to stress, anxiety, self-esteem, loss of passion, work-related issues, family and work-life balance. I love that. And I was a life coach, and basically a life coach helps a client pursue any goal. And one of the things I offered was life balancing one's life. And of course, depending on what model you use, there's like 7 to 10 different categories or areas of life where you can balance your life. Never did a single prospect or client ever want me to work on this. It was always goals, or dysfunction, going from dysfunction to functional, or help pursue goals. Nobody was interested in balancing their life, which always amused me. But just a little interesting tidbit from me. And to continuing on and concluding with her bio, so she works with people with mental health diagnosis, and that's great because because of your background with your universities and your certifications, you can do that. Once I heard that, I always asked if a client had a diagnosis from in the psychology field, in the psychological medical field, I wouldn't work with them, at least on that issue. I could work with them on other issues, but not that one. But you can do that, and that's awesome. That is fantastic for your clients. And more therapists are also coaches, and like Kim here. I think that she really focuses on coaching now. Is that correct? Me if I'm wrong, Kim. Is that correct?
Yes. The thing about it will be so helpful if you find someone that have human services experience when you're looking for a coach, particularly because it's not that because if you don't have these experience or this training, you're not a good coach. It's just that it allows you the ability to perhaps screen out certain type of services that the individual needs. So someone who comes to me for venting with everyday life problem, they're not clinically diagnosed. If it becomes a point when they should be, that's the part where I refer out. I don't like to provide services that are beyond what my scopes of service is. If you're coming in for life coach, then you should receive life coach services. And I think the part that most people sometimes had negative experience with their life coach is because the individuals are providing more beyond their scope of service. And you don't to do that, and you should not do that. It's not ethical to do that.
Okay, now thank you for that clarification. So people with diagnoses, they have a place to go, which are therapists, generally speaking, and that's not what Kim does. She works with people like I did with everyday issues, and they can turn to support for you to you because that's what life coaching does, and that's great. Very good. I love life coaching. I tell you, getting the outcomes, getting the gains and the strides is one of the greatest things, And then especially when I'm a practitioner of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. Are you?
No.
Okay, but NLP is very controversial, and there's all different ways to coach someone. But I found that in coaching, it's fantastic. And sometimes I would use techniques or methods that I might have been familiar with, but especially when I used one or a set that I was unfamiliar with, and we got that stride of the outcome. It was the greatest thing in the world. I was like, man, this shit really works. People, I'm like, remember, I'm like, how you feel? And they're like, oh, I feel great. I'm like, well, what about that problem you had? And like, what problem? I'm like, the thing you were crying about a half hour ago, you needed a box of Kleenex to get. No, that doesn't bother me anymore. I love that. That was one of the greatest. I love, it's pretty common for people to love to help others. Obviously, we're in the helping field, right? We're change workers, we're supporters, and you better really, but not everybody likes to help others, but you better really like to help others in this field. But it was one of the greatest things about getting that, that stride or that outcome as a coach. Do you agree?
I do, and that's the reason most of people go into this field. I think that one of the interesting part, I think you asked me earlier, why venting, why that, and why not therapy, why not counseling? I have the background, I have the degree, I have the ability to do that. Well, venting to me is to be a venting life coach. I see myself as a preventive care services. You know how you go to your PCP and they know a lot of stuff, but when you need something more specific, they refer you to cardiologist, urologist, whatever your needs are. But a PCP generally can give you the medical attention.
What is a PCP?
Primary care doctor.
Got you.
Okay, it's a comparative. So the way I see venting is this, is that people don't always know exactly what's going on. They know that they have an issue. It's interfering with their life. They're stressed. They're not themselves. They don't always think that, okay, I need to go seek help. That's not something they always do. And there's stigma with seeking help. You know, now it's
it sure is
more accepted, but there is a stigma associated with getting help. The other thing is, who wants to admit they fail in life, that they need a life coach? Who really wants to do that, right?
That's
so
right.
that get people to get help is at least be the support they need when they don't have somebody available. So for example, Tony, there got to be a time when you're a little stressed and somebody asks you, how's it going? How's it been? Next thing you know, you're telling your whole life story for the week, the struggles that you go through, and you're venting. And that's awesome. It's great if you have someone. But what if you didn't and you're just venting to a total stranger in an office next to you? They're just simply asking how you're doing. They're not that interested. So the idea of this business is to create a place for individual that needs a little support. Because we all do, no matter who we are, no matter what age we're in, and no matter how successful or unsuccessful we are, we need support. And one of the unique things about venting is this. When you spend quality time with your loved one, you're able to really spend quality time with them. You're not spending time talking about your emotional distress, because after over a period of doing this over and over again, you actually are dumping. You are dumping your emotional stress on the people you love. That's the part. So now retaining a life coach that does that for you. Can imagine having one day a week, an hour to talk about some of the most intimate things that you want to talk about that you necessarily don't want to burden anyone else, right? People talk a lot about toxic relationship because they're on the receiving end. They're on the receiving end of listening over and over again about people venting about their life.
Kim, we're getting into a huge area right now, and I want to talk all about it. So before, and it's huge, it's multifaceted, and there's a lot of meat to it. So before we do that, let's take a moment to hear from our sponsor, and then we're going to come right back, and we're going to talk about that venting and that support, and there's so many sides to it, because that's going to be a huge discussion right there. So great stuff. A moment to hear from our sponsor, and we'll come right back with Oanh Kim Lam.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Petrozza. People start something, then something comes up, or they need a break or even a vacation, and they often never get back on track. Petrozza is designed to allow all of this. Visit www.petrozza.io. That's PERFICIO.io, where you can live your life as you learn and make progress toward your life-changing goals.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Tony Petrozza. We're having a really wonderful conversation with Oanh Kim Lam. We're talking about venting and coaching. And I stopped for the break. And Kim, you can continue, or I can reply or interject. Which would you prefer?
I just finish up my thought, and then we'll go from there.
Go.
Yeah?
Yes.
So, when we're venting to the people we care about, we have this basic assumption that they can handle what we're sharing, that they're giving us permission to actually disclose what it is that we're disclosing, right? So we made that basic assumption, and then we get really upset when they're not present. They're not there. They're not listening, not as attentive. They don't really give us any solution, or they just kind of too involved. They started getting involved, and then they make it about them. So we get upset. We want something, but we get upset when we don't get what we want, right? And then we also don't think about the byproduct of what we're doing to the people, because we don't get to see their side of the story. So now I'm gonna ask you to ask me what you need me to clarify, and then I'm gonna go into something interesting about the mental health field and why most people don't talk about this. And this is the other part why people should pay for services versus using their friends and family as a provider.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, and this is very intriguing and more. So, as a person and when I was working as a life coach, which I don't anymore. Now I'm the head of a technological coaching company that's launching a revolutionary app that's going to transform self-help, blah, blah, blah. Enough of that. But I didn't give a client much leeway, or people in my own life to vent, because I don't like that. To me, I'm like complaining. Do you compare venting with complaining?
Venting is like the first step. Then it becomes complaining when it's repeatedly. Then it becomes dumping when you're just not even giving any consideration for who's listening or not listening, and you don't care how you feel bad. You just want to get it all out.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Fair enough. Yeah, I don't like to complain. I don't think people should complain, because I think that there's some benefit to it. I think the downside is much greater. But I think that not that I'm questioning what you're doing. I think you really know what you're doing. I really get that sense. I think it has to be done the right way, where you can guide somebody and not let them be toxic or become toxic, which is, just doing the same thing over and over and not making any progress or reconciliation or forgiveness or whatever. But on the other side of that coin, when it comes to expression, I'm the biggest proponent for expression there is. I think that's one of my great strengths is being expressive. I'm generally a healthy person, emotionally and physically, because I am expressive. And I think that is a critical thing, is to be expressive. Do not bottle things. Let it out in a way that's not, psychotic. I have some sort of guidance. That's a critical thing. And if you're going to do that with a professional like yourself, or anyone who has a training or a background and knows what to look for, what to listen for, and has tools and techniques to help guide you to a place of function or a place of greater happiness, or a place more glorious, and then you're on your way. So I that's my view of the matter. Does that sound valid to you?
Yeah, it does, because the thing is, people would ask like, well, why do I come and see you to vent? Well, it's venting is what my niche is, but the results are apparently, one, venting with a professional yields healthy consequences. It feels healthy. It doesn't feel like you're just, I want to say dumping, but you're just intrusive and you're just telling people, and they might not welcome that, right? They're not ready for that. They're not emotionally ready for your stuff. The other part is very structured. We ask guided questions to structure the venting. So it's not like you go on and on. There's some way for that. You can't. And then the other part is this repeated cycle of constantly talking about the same thing. You can do that with the people that are in your life, but you really don't do that with your coach, because your coach is supposed to be good enough to structure you so that you can be able to vent, but at the same time, point out certain things like that makes the person more accountable for what it is that they're venting about. It's very solution focused. So it's not just about venting. First is to get it out there so that you can release some of that emotional distress. But secondly, ultimately is to help you cope with it, or help you figure out what you need to do to minimize the effect that it has on you, so that you can be quote unquote more functional, more balanced, more happy, more, I would say, more of the person you want it to be.
I think the critical thing is, and I really like what you're doing here, or what you do, is that your niche is venting, okay, which is helping a person get to what's bothering them without it becoming toxic or dumping, and intervening as a professional so that you can have that as a starting point to move them in the direction that they want to go. And that, is that correct?
Yeah, and I think the part that I really enjoy, because when you create your own business, you have the opportunity to create in a way that you know your target audience looking for. When you work for someone, when you work for an agency, you have to kind of obey to the expectations and the rules of the agency. But being in the field for so long, I realized that I'm not in the business, and I told you this, and when we started talking, is that I'm not in the business of having a lot of clients. I'm a very small, personalized coach. I'm not interested in having a bunch of clients. I'm actually interested in the quality of services that I provide. I'm not interested in a lot of stuff that typical business do. I did mention like a small mom and pop kind of business model, because the idea is, I said to you, I'm not big on technology. I'm not advertising all over the place. I'm not out minute making presentations about who I am. I have the option now to kind of present myself, attract the clients that I want to attract, and work with the people that really wanted to work with me. Coaches are everywhere, Tony. You know that. You know, in our field is saturated with coach, right?
Kim, this is another huge topic. So, and I love it. I'm savoring to talk about it. So let's take a moment to hear from our sponsor, and then we're going to get into this juicy topic. Great stuff.
Okay.
We'll come right back with Oanh Kim Lam.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Petrozza. Poor finances are the leading cause of stress, divorce, and general troubles. Financial managers, coaches, and consultants are great, but responsibility rests with you. There are new answers. Visit www.perficio.io. That's PERFICIO.io, where you can truly learn the foundational attitudes and methods of accruing wealth and staying wealthy.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Tony Petrozza. We're having a fantastic discussion with Oanh Kim Lam, and we're talking about coaching and life coaching and why someone might want to get one and the different kinds there are and what Kim's particular practice is. So, all right, let's back up slightly. Why should people consider a venting life coach service?
Well, in our field, there's so many types of coaching. You know, there is career coaching, health coaching, relationship coaching. Everybody break down into a niche, right?
There's got to be at least 100 kinds.
There is, because there's services. When you make purchasing decision, because it's not insurance cover, right? You have the right to decide who you want to work with, whatever your life that you want to work with, right? So I thought about this and I said, you know, my service is very specialized. And one of the things I want to do is not work with a big caseload. It's hard to work and support people, a bunch of people. I don't want to do that. I want to be the support that they come through. It's like, you know, you have a family lawyer, a family accountant, somebody that you go through generations and they know you and you feel like you're talking to someone. The only exception is when you retain a venting coach, all your informations that you talked about are kept confidential the same way you do when you end mental health services, right? Relationships, natural relationship supports are only as good as the relationship still exists. There's no bind, Tony. If you actually tell somebody something, you can only hope that that stays confidential, right? It does not always.
Right.
It does not always.
Yeah.
And when you're choosing a coach, I've always said, listen, you don't have to choose me. Choose who fits you. A life coach, you know, part of it is temperament. If all things being equal, we have the same experience, same background, we've been doing this for a while, what makes us different? It all comes down to temperament, personality, how we feel we connect, because connectivity is so important. If you don't connect with your therapist, your counselor, your life coach, not a lot is going on. not a lot is going on.
Absolutely. Having a rapport is a critical thing between a coach and a client. And that it's so important is because when a person has a rapport, then they can feel they can trust you, and they can talk with you about these things that are interior, that they complain and dump, or now instead of complain and dump, they can vent to someone who knows what to listen for, knows what to look for, and knows how to guide them. That's a big difference, right? And I am of the belief and the position, you really have got to identify a problem in order to solve it properly. And I think that from my take, and so that's why I really limit people in complaining and dumping. But that's not what you do. You don't allow people to do that. You allow them to vent. So you guide them. I think that from my view, guiding them so that you can, obviously there's quote unquote negative emotions or energies inside that need the dissipation or expression, and that's very healthy. But to identify the problem to me is a critical thing. If you identify the problem, then you can consider the possible solutions and then make a decision on what course to take. Do you work that way at all, Kim?
I do. I think I can give you an example how I can walk you to the process of what my retainer clients and what I do with them.
Sure.
Typically when I do venting, I take inventory of everything that's going on in the person's life. I listen attentively. I take notes. I basically have a dossier pretty much on their life profile, right? And then I would just okay, of all these stuff, what is the biggest thing you want to do now? What is it that you want to focus on? And then in the back somewhere, I'm always focusing on all the other things that they talked about, the things that they share. I want to know what they want to work on. And then I want to identify some of the things that are contributing to the issues that they're talking about. And it's always there. And it's not, and life coaching for some people is very time limited. It's quick, result oriented, moved on. Well, a venting life coach is a luxury of which you can actually retain, where you can work on different things at the same time. Because we're not a creature of goals. We're not someone who's constantly every day working on goals. So to identify a goal and make the person stick to it every day, every week, every session is unrealistic. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for you. You don't expect that to work for your client. So what a typical client does with me is they said all these things that they're not completely satisfied with, but they're not working on. They're just not satisfied. We identify all that stuff. And while they're venting, basically, we work on one and we dabble on the other one and work on this one because it's less resistant. You don't even know you're working. You're not even aware you're transforming. You're not even doing that. But every month we sit down, we capture, and we said, hey, listen, remember we talked about the last week or last month? How are you on that? Oh, I feel better. We're not doing that anymore. It doesn't bother me as much. Why? What makes it not bother you as much? Because we improved one area that it affected the other area.
Absolutely.
But in order to do that, you need to be able to listen, and you need to be able to allow the person to be their authentic self without judging, without interfering with how they feel. And judging is the number one reason people don't want to seek help. They don't want to.
Absolutely. Totally. I totally agree with you. You're 100% spot on. And, and another thing, and you alluded to it, I think that a critical part of why you're so valuable is because you take notes. So, right, you take notes about the person. So it's not, now you take that information and you use it for their goal, for their outcome, and as opposed to a person just, venting the same crap over and over. Now you like, okay, we've heard this before. Okay, so what are we going to do here? Are we going to keep do repetition, or are we going to get to a place where you can stop venting some new stuff? Right? You're bringing them in a direction. From my view, you tell me if that's not what you do. To me, it seems like you bring them in a direction, and then you also have generative change, which you just talked about. And is it go on?
Do you know how wonderful it is to feel when you talk to someone who's not judging you, who whatever
Fantastic.
say is acceptable? I might not agree with it, but it's acceptable. It is your life, not mine, right? And do you know the feeling you get when you have a problem and then your problem doesn't exist anymore and you don't know why? Because it's natural process of healing, of doing things that are actually just doing little tiny things. I break every complex situation a person have into tiny little things that they could do effortless, so they don't even know they're evolving and changing. Just the very first step of just releasing that emotional distress is the first step of self-care. People talk about self-care all the time, but they need to translate in a way it works. We looked at a list of self-care suggestions and say, oh, that sounds really good. Problem is we don't always implement it. We have a hard time implementing what it is that we need to do. When you're working with someone who's listening, who is actually pointing out certain stuff for you, you'll be more aware, more conscious. And that's why it helps. And the process of helping is not like you're a client and I'm your coach and I know what to do, so therefore you need to do what I suggested. It's none of that. You're not going to get that from me. Yeah. I'm going to present you with a bunch of things that you should think about. And then you're going to say, I'm going to say, what did you pick? And you're going to say, I picked this one. And I say, well, how did it go? And you say, I think it's not going as well. Why not? Oh, because of this. Do you think you want to substitute this? Maybe. Something simple.
So that's great. So you have like a therapy side, but I'm not gonna put it in a box like that at all. But you're more like in some ways you're like a therapist, but you definitely are coaching. You ask guided questions so that a client can get make the progress they want on their own terms. So that is extremely an excellent way to go about it. And you also said something which lit me up, which I'll come back in a break from the break and I'll talk about it. But I'll just give a little teaser to the audience right now. What do you think about the possibility of Kim being my co-host on this podcast? A little yin yang going on here. All right. A little feminine, masculine. You could see, if you're listening, the differences between us. Obviously we're in the same tribe. We're in the same field, but we have different approaches and different outlooks. Lots of commonality, but lots of differences, and they're wonderful differences. So I'm intrigued by it, and because that's really shown itself to me, what everything I just described. So we're going to take a moment to hear from our sponsor, and when we come back, we'll talk about that and other things. So this is a great conversation we're having. We'll come right back with Oanh Kim Lam.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Perficio. Ever heard of accelerated learning techniques? What if you learned more deeply than ever before? What if you remembered what you learned far better than ever before? Visit www.perficio.io. That's perficio.io, where you can understand perhaps better than ever before.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Tony Petrozza, and the possibility of Oanh Kim Lam being a co-host. Oh, my God. I just introduced the idea just before the commercial break. And so we're having this great discussion about how Kim coaches and, her expertise on the matter, and not just because it's not limited to just coaching. She has a great background in psychology. Of course, coaching is a kind of psychology, but she has I'm talking about the kind of psychology where you have to go to school for, maybe get certifications or state legal government recognition, which coaching, you don't have any of that. And she has all of that. So, you talk about the differences. She's a much more of a listener. And of course, as a coach, I always got to listen, excuse me, but she does less. I do. In my coaching styles, I do a lot of guiding, but I guide a person to their outcome. It seems to me that she would, your goal might be just to get them to feel better in general, as opposed to a guidance. Is that correct? Would you say that's true?
That is true. The reason they're paying for is because they want to feel better.
Right.
But the other part, Tony, is that how often do you get sort of exclusivity when you're seeking services? You want people to cater to your needs because you're paying for it. You're paying for it. You're paying for someone to listen. So that's the other piece that most people aren't aware of. So I don't want to say that I'm a life coach for everyone. I particularly have in mind that I think would do well. And so, I am not out there, like I said, every day trying to market. You don't really see me doing that a lot because I just feel like you just know when you make a connection. Just like, how you go to a doctor and you love your doctor, and everywhere you go, somebody talks about doctor. You're like, oh my God, I love my doctor. Oh my God, I have a great accountant for you because he's my accountant. We've been using his services for years. That's the kind of coach I want to be. I don't want to be Instagram famous. I'm not on TikTok. I don't do any of those stuff.
So do you consider a life coach as a luxury service?
I definitely do. If anything you have to pay for, it is luxury. But it's also a preventive. It's before things fall apart.
That's an excellent approach.
Yeah, I'm the person before they fall apart, because in the mental health field, I only get them when things are already going way too far. I remember sitting in session thinking, oh my God, where were you? Where were you 20 years ago? And my clients have asked me that often too. When I used to do therapy, they're like, oh my God, I cannot believe it. Why did I not see you before? And it wasn't something I said profoundly. Honestly, Tony, it wasn't like I was so good, but it was just one of my big strengths is being able to be present in the moment with the person. They absolutely love it. My show rates are so high because of that when I'm with you, I am with you. There is no phone call. There's no this. There's no distraction. I don't do that because I value connection. So when
I like a description you gave of what you do in your firm, your practice, I should say. You said that, quote, my service is like a small mom and pop restaurants in your neighborhood that you love so much. Just simple comfort foods made by a couple who runs the entire thing on a low budget, low cost, low tech. And you mentioned that your mentor wants you to be on Instagram, YouTube, and you're not interested in all that social media. You want to keep it on the down low, just provide quality. It seems like you want to have basically a small clientele. As opposed to you're not about quantity, you're about that quality.
That's exactly right, because have to see client on a every day, like rotating, changing all the time, being in the nonprofit world, I don't really think that's helpful. It's not good for people to have. It's good for people to have consistency, and as I love technology, I'm just not into it. I love the fact that it's really, really convenient. I mean, the way you and I are able to talk now with your audience, it's definitely convenient. However, it's not for everyone. I like the old ways of doing things. I like to connect people. Maybe eventually when I retire, I'd like to have a little office where I actually want to see a client in person, because that's where I'm most absolutely effective in providing service. I have this love for helping people. And, usually 20 years, people are burnt out. Well, I'm not. I'm still doing this. I'm still loving it and still planning my next stage in life, which is, it's important. I don't get out because I'm burnt out. I get out because I realize I'm good at something.
That's great stuff, Kim, really. Now, I want to get back up for a second slightly. Now, we talked about this, but I like to ask the question. Now, we talked about your background in psychology and the differences of the differences of therapy versus coaching. But why should a person go with a venting life coach and not a therapist or a counselor? Why?
One, if you can get a therapist, go ahead and get one. If you can get a counselor, go ahead and get. That is the beautiful part about choice. You have a choice. The only thing is, if you're not clinically diagnosed, your problems are not to a point where it interferes your life, right? You might not want to do that yet. You're not ready. I am the readiness person. I'm the one that does the preventive stuff. If you're stressed, You came to me, you're not as stressed, you resume normal function. You might not need a therapist. When you come to me, I couldn't resolve your problem. Guess what we're doing? You're going to see a therapist, Tony. I'm going to be referring you out. So the thing is that you go wherever the service meets your need. So you don't have to choose a life coach. If you have an issue that is paid for by insurance, go see a therapist, go see a counselor. If you for a life coach, you do that. But the other part is, remember this, not every problem is a mental health problem. Okay?
That's right.
The issues you have requires a trained mental health specialist. You just have a little bit difficulty. We all do. We all do have difficulty in our life. That doesn't mean we have to see a therapist, but if you need to, you should. Because my background is therapy and my background is in treatment. So I advocate for that, absolutely. But for the luxurious people, for people that have everyday problems, you don't need to go, you don't have to go. That's the thing about my approach to life is you have the choice. People who come to life coach, it's not like I know the answer. You know, they know the answer. They're the author, the producer, the playwright of their own life. I'm just here to help. I'm here to help you behind the scene. I don't know your life the way you do, but I'm here to help. That's what I see myself as.
You know, as I had just mentioned just a little while ago, when Kim first submitted herself, her information to be on the podcast as a guest, she included the quip that she said, by the way, quote unquote, by the way, you need a female co-host, LOL, add fun into the mix. And now that I've spoken with her, we've had this conversation that you've heard, I'm tending to agree with her. I think that I think we have a great chemistry. Yeah, obviously, professionally speaking, great chemistry, but that we have different approaches and trainings that and way styles that we cover. There's so much more. I mean, the stuff that you like that you're not into, being like that. Just call it masculine. Or just call it masculine. I'm the masculine. You're the feminine, and that's truly, and that's obviously that's obvious. I'm a man. You're a woman. But I think that your style is quite feminine, and my style is actually quite masculine. And I think that's a great combination, a great yin yang that could be very intriguing and interesting. Having podcast interviews, bringing that to the guest. Now, obviously, you're my guest on this interview, but I consider, what about, bringing that yin yang, that masculine, feminine to other interviews when you're not the guest. I think that is really interesting. What do you think about that, Kim?
I was watching your previous podcast, and I thought, well,
which one? Which interview?
I clicked on a bunch of them because when you first approached me, I was like, yeah, let me just do like some behind the scene, because one, this is my first podcast, is my first appearance. I'm like, I don't even know how you found me. I'm so small.
I have to keep it accurate. I didn't find you. My podcast manager or my executive assistant found you. They found you. And you must have obviously been very appealing. They said, look, hey, this is a good candidate.
I have no idea. I'm like, why would they? Because I see myself as this really low key. I don't know how people could find me. I only have one page, which is the Facebook website, so people can find me. But I really was surprised. But one of the things I noticed is this. When you have a couple people or you have a dual person doing a podcast, it's interesting because you are the host of the show. I can only support you and be able to provide some questions or some things, because people don't know what it takes to run a podcast if they've never done it. Your assistant and the people that set me up to do this, they are so on point. I never done this before, and they walk me through this process. It's a lot of behind the scene work that your audience don't know that it takes for you to do what you do in the hours that you do, right? So behind the scene, nobody knows. And I was watching and I was just thinking, sometimes it's good to have like an opposite or have somebody else, because when you're interviewing people, it's such a fast pace. You don't get a chance to do that deep processing or that questions that you want. So when you have a partner, your partner can ask the question while it gives you a chance, an opportunity to rethink about what it is that you want to ask. And then it's just a very good cohesive interview. And it's just create that little balance that you're looking for, you know? And you're absolutely right that my style is definitely different than yours. I'm more relaxed, easygoing. I'm very solution and goal oriented. But in my approach, it's like you don't really know I'm doing that.
You do it in a very soft way, and my way is more harder. And that became quite apparent. So I certainly was open to it. And I'm very intrigued by it, and I'm attracted to it. So I want you. I don't know what do you think about? I mean, I want you to think about it going forward. But what are your thoughts on it right now? I know it was your idea from the first place. But would you like to do that? Would you like to be if not my co-host, my guest co-host sometimes?
I would definitely. It will be really fun. This will be really fun for me. It's definitely different. I don't do it often, and I don't anticipate it. But life is about opportunity, and you don't always get to plan out what it is that's coming.
Right.
So in the kind of business that we do, we always support individuals to know that, when you put things out in the universe, sometime it does come true. I was only kidding and said, you need a co-host, and I was just like, I was only kidding because that's what I observe. And I'm very, forward and open when I say things. So I put it out in the universe. I wasn't thinking me. I was just thinking you need a co-host, a female co-host. I wasn't thinking me particular because I was thinking, I don't know anything about technology. I don't know anything about podcasts. So I wasn't thinking me particularly. But I think if your audience liked it and they felt like what I had to offer could be beneficial, it would be worth their time listening. Of course, absolutely. This is interesting for me. It's not something I expected.
Okay, great. So at this point, there's a good chance of it. If you have any idea, any opinion on it, please let us know on social media or on the website at selfhelpcoaching.com. But I'm open to it. At least I'm not saying regularly, but I'm saying at least intermittently, I'm open to it. And it seems like Kim is. So that's great. And we're going to leave it at that. And I'm going to say, Kim, it's been a wonderful meeting and conversation with you. And now you already said how do people contact you? I know you're on Facebook. Say how people can contact you, please. I am on Facebook. I listed my business on Google so people can Google me. But that's it. I don't really have a lot going on. This is it. Like you just go to Facebook, contact me, go to Google and Google. I don't. Okay, but your profiles are Venti. What's your profile on Facebook? What is it?
It's Venti Vent Life Coaching.
Okay, it's Venti VENTEA VEMT. Is that right?
Yes, Venti Vent and then Life Coaching.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. We gotta get the spelling right.
Okay.
Spell it out before Life Coaching.
Oh, okay. So Venti is VENTEA and then Vent Life Coaching.
Okay, Vent. Okay, all right, got it. Venti Vent Life Coaching. Because what confused me is you actually put an M in your submission form, and that's what confused me. All right. Now we clarified it. Great. So Venti Vent Life Coaching on Facebook. Great. And or is there maybe a number or an email address that you want to put out there, or just have them go to your Facebook?
The Facebook will give you directions how to reach out to me.
Right.
I want as simple as possible. There's not a lot of things you got to do. You go there, you read my bio, you decide you want a consult, you definitely could ask for one. I do provide detail an hour of consult, which typically people don't do. And I do that because one, I'm actually allowing the person to get to know me a little bit, just not about what I do, but actually just connect a little bit to see if this is something fun. Yeah.
So you offer is this a free consultation you're talking about, or is it? Okay,
yeah.
Oh, that's great. So if you want to speak to Kim and see if it's a match for a free consultation, go to her Facebook page, which is Venti Vent Life Coaching on Facebook. I just followed you yesterday. It was very interesting. So, and then she'll offer you a free it was a phone call,
Consult, yeah.
a consultation on the phone or on a Zoom or is it?
Yes, on Zoom,
Okay.
FaceTime.
And you'll see if it's a match for you and if you want to hire. Great stuff. Kim, it's been a pleasure having you on here. I really appreciate it. Great meeting you. And now the future is open for us to see if we can be co-hosts on my podcast. I like the idea of it. We'll talk more about it. And thank you so much for coming on. And remember, audience, we're all responsible for ourselves, and we could all use a little help. With that, thank you for listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast. Kim, thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Okay.
Say bye. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast, where insights, attitudes, and methods for success get illuminated. Learn what leaders and change workers have done and are doing now to create magnificent futures. Remember to visit our website at self-helpcoaching.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Self-Help Coaching Podcast.